Excellent. So yeah, as we said, as the slide says, in this session we'll go through who we are, an overview of the project grants, who can apply, and then what we can't fund, the application process, when to apply, step by step, and application guidance, and then what happens next. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end, but if not, you can always contact us on our email. Just in general housekeeping, please keep yourself on mute for the whole time. As I said, the meeting is going to be recorded and we'll be sharing a copy of the slides after this event. Please try and keep any questions till the end of the event and we'll go through them then. We'll be using some key terms throughout the presentation, which will be abbreviated. So VCS will mean voluntary and community sector, organisation and group, which may be used interchangeably, except for and specifically referring to structured groups of residents. Grant agreement means a legally binding agreement all organisations must sign to have funds released. Schedule is parts of a grant agreement, such as a copy of your budget. And request is your request for funding, often used interchangeably with project or application. So yeah, this is a team. Me and Lisa on the call today, and we'll be part, and you'll mainly be in contact with one of us, but you also might be having contact with anybody else from the team. So my name is Thomas Shaw. I'm the Senior Grants and Investment Officer in the Community Grants team. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa. I'm the Grants and Investment Manager. And also on the team, we've got Sue and Moyo, and we're led by Claire Whitney, who's the strategic lead. So all looking forward to working with you over the coming months. So I think it's still me for this one. So just to give you an overview, so our two programme priorities that underpin the whole grants programme have been updated this year to reflect the Council's new strategic plan, and you can find a link to that on our website. So for our project grants, as well as these two programme priorities, we're also looking for grants that support the 6 equality aims, which if you applied last year, you might recognise these from the Children and Young People's programme. So they are identity and belonging, being healthy, making a positive contribution, achieving economic and financial well-being, enjoying and achieving, and being safe. So hopefully those are familiar for those of you who have applied last year. So just to give an overview of the open schemes for this year, so we've got our project grants programme, which hopefully, as you know, because you're in this call today, has separate strands for Children and Young People's Fund, which is the same as last year. And new for this year, we also have Healthier Hackney grants. So the exact funding amount does vary per strand, but generally grants of up to around £20,000 are available. So the information sessions for project grants in Healthier Hackney are taking place tomorrow if you want to find out more about those programmes. And just to be clear, in order to apply for a project grant, your organisation must have an annual income of between £10,000 and £1 million. And just to answer a question that came up in the chat, the deadline for that is 27th of March, not 27th of February. That was incorrectly listed on our website this morning, but that has been changed now, so 27th of March. So Community Chest is the next funding programme, which will remain similar to previous years. We'll continue to have 4 rounds of funding, and this grant is for small organisations with an annual income of less than £10,000. Thirdly, we've got Community Infrastructure, which was a programme that was launched last year. So there are already 20 organisations funded through this programme. So this year's fund will be quite limited, and we'll be only looking to fund around 5 more organisations to add to that network of 20 funded organisations. So just very briefly, this table is our closed schemes for this year. So Specialist Grants is a programme to support key organisations within the borough, and we're continuing to review this programme and see how it aligns with our wider approach to supporting the VCS in Hackney. And our social welfare advice grants, which are funding for advice services in the borough, which have been further stretched during the cost of living crisis. So the application for these took place in autumn 2022, with new 3-year grants being awarded from April 2023, so that will not be open again for another couple of years. So we're now going to talk about the Children and Young People's Fund in further detail, so I'm going to pass back over to Tom for that. Oh, you're on mute, Tom.
Sorry, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, as I said, this is for Children and Young People's Fund. The purpose of this is to fund activities specifically supporting young people. The application should be funding for projects between £1,001 and up to £20,000. These can last no longer than 12 months. As with all our schemes, organisations cannot apply for an amount that exceeds 50% of their annual income. Some examples are here from last year of grants of programmes we funded. One was a free multi-sports programme for young people running on 3 estates in Hackney, and a programme for young people from Black and global majority backgrounds focusing on heritage, identity, belonging, and building a personal collective voice. Our general eligibility criteria is as follows. Organisations must be not-for-profit, value-driven, and principally reinvest their surpluses to further social, environmental, or cultural objectives. These are typically organisations such as registered charity or charitable incorporated organisations, or charitable companies, companies limited by guarantee, social enterprises, and community interest companies. Private businesses and individuals are not eligible to apply for grant funding from this programme, and at least 80% of the people benefiting from funding request must be Hackney residents. Along with this, applications must align with our programme guidance for the scheme that they're applying for, including start and end dates and annual income criteria. If applicants have received a grant through this programme in previous years have failed to fulfil any of the funding requirements of their previous grant, including things like returning of requiring monitoring forms, they may not be eligible to apply for the grant. In addition to the general eligibility outlined, organisation will also need to provide a number of documents along with their application, which we'll use to conduct due diligence checks. This varies slightly depending on the type of organisation and also if you're a structured group of residents, which is for our community chest only. Generally, organisations must be registered with articles and/or constitution with clearly defined aims and objectives, have an organisational bank account. Where this isn't possible, for example, for group of residents, checks will be carried out before funding is released to an individual account. Annual accounts must show income and expenditure. In the case of smaller groups, a financial forecast or projection. You must have appropriate insurance and safeguarding policies and be able to demonstrate that 80% of the beneficiaries will be Hackney residents. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Tom. So the VCS grants programme generally doesn't accept applications for any of the following. So activities that are political or exclusively religious, excessive overheads, capital or building costs, costs incurred before the start of the grant date, cost of work or activities that an organisation has a statutory duty to undertake, activities outside of Hackney, although there are some exceptions. So, for example, if it's organising a trip or if there's a specific activity that has to happen outside the borough. Previous debts, including contingent liabilities, contingencies, interest charges, service charges, depreciation of fixed assets, and any costs that aren't outlined within your grants application. So this is all outlined in the guidance document, but make sure you have a look at this when you're putting your budget together. So speaking of budgets, budgeting is important in any application, but it's become increasingly so during the cost of living crisis. So when preparing your application, some things you might want to consider. So think really carefully and realistically when putting your budgets together and factor in potential price rises. Please bear in mind, we always look at value for money when assessing applications, but that doesn't mean that we only fund the lowest cost projects. So don't feel like when you're putting your budget together, you have to scrimp on costs. We want your budget to be an accurate reflection of what you actually need to spend, because the last thing we want is for you to put a budget in, and then find that you can't afford to deliver the project anymore. So do be realistic when putting your costs in. Ensure you're taking into consideration paying staff at least the London living wage, so take things like that into consideration. And also just bear in mind, once we've given you your grant, we are unable to offer you any uplifts once you've been awarded your funding. So just bear that in mind. You know, it's not that, oh, well, let's apply for this and then we can ask for some more later. Our budgets are fixed, so we can't give you more funding. But we'll always try and be flexible with agreeing any slight variations within the funding that you get. So if you need to move around budget lines and so forth, but just bear that in mind when putting your application together. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Lisa. So we receive a lot of high quality applications each year, and unfortunately we cannot fund them all. The assessment process will looks at applications comparatively and takes into account areas of key need in terms of geography and beneficiary groups. The application will ask you to choose key beneficiary groups along with information about protected characteristics. We appreciate that each and every individual is unique and experiences various levels of intersectionality. To mitigate this, we ask in the application that you describe your beneficiary group and why you are best placed to deliver your services to them. With all applications, we try to prioritise organisations who are led by people with lived experience of the issues and/or have an active commitment to involving beneficiaries in the design and delivery of their services. We've tweaked our beneficiary groups last year to better reflect needs across Hackney. These are general across the whole of the grant schemes, but you'll see that some will be taken out depending on the specific programme. For example, for the Children and Young People's Fund, it's not relevant to have a key beneficiary group of older people. Our key beneficiary groups are listed here and included in our guidance documents. To you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tom. So this is a little visual representation of the application process for this grant scheme. So basically the first step is to plan your application. So use the guidance document provided on the website and this information session to start planning, and do contact us if you have any questions at all. So apply in advance of the deadline using our grants application portal, which we're going to show you shortly. Once you've applied, the grants team will undertake due diligence checks based on the information you provide in your application. So please do look out for communications from us if there's any missing documentation, because we will request that at some point. So that your application will then be passed on to volunteers from within the council and the local VCS, who will conduct an assessment of your application, which we'll talk about a little more detail today, and they will then make recommendations on your application. So based on that assessment, grants officers might contact you to ask some clarifying questions on part of your application that the assessors were unclear about or wanted more information on. So please do ensure that you respond to any questions in advance of the deadline, as this may affect how your application is discussed at the panel. So this is a new stage that we've introduced this year based on your feedback, and it's basically just to give an opportunity for organisations to clarify anything that wasn't 100% clear, so that we're not knocking you out of the race without giving you a fair chance of giving us that information. So assessors will then meet at a grants panel to discuss all the applications comparatively and take into account contextual information and key needs within the borough. So they'll make their decisions at the panel, and these decisions will then need to be signed off by senior officers at the council. So once that's happened, you'll be notified of the outcome of your application as soon as possible after panel. We will always offer feedback to all unsuccessful applicants, and we really do encourage you to reach out to us for this if you are unsuccessful. We'll take time to talk you through your application, bits that can be improved, and it's just generally quite helpful. And we do spend a lot of time doing that and really encourage you to contact us for that. If you are successful, then you'll be issued with a grant agreement, and you can then start delivery of your grant. More information about the process of being a grant holder can be found on our grantee guidance document on our website, so you can have a look through that if you're not sure what being a grantee entails. So this table again outlines that the deadline for project grants is 27th of March at 5 p.m. The application form will go down at 5 p.m. on the 27th of March, so you cannot apply after that date under any circumstances. So please do ensure you've given yourself enough time to complete and submit the application, factoring in any potential technical difficulties, because there's really nothing we can do to help after that deadline has passed. So we aim to let applicants know the outcome of their application, hopefully week commencing 1st of May 2023. And just to reiterate, these are for projects beginning this financial year. So this is where it could all go horribly wrong. So I'm going to try and do a live demonstration. So apologies in advance if we have any technical difficulties. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log on to the grants website so you can see what the application form looks like. So you can access the link on our website. You'll need to set up a login, or you sign in using an existing one if you've applied before. And once you've done this, you can go back to your application by visiting the portal directly. You can save your progress as you go along, but we do strongly advise you to write your answers on some kind of offline document and copy and paste it, just in case there are any technical difficulties, because we can't help to retrieve any answers that have been lost on the system. So let's see if this is going to work. Great. So you've clicked on the link and this is what the first page looks like. So this is called the eligibility quiz. So you basically have to be able to answer yes to all of these questions in order to apply for the grant. So are you not for profit? Oh, no. Yes. Will the request have 80% of its beneficiaries in Hackney? Yes. Do you have all of these documents? Yes. Will my project start this financial year? Yes. And then this bit here is just to ensure you're applying for the right fund. So project grants, children and young people's, or Healthier Hackney. So I want to apply for children and young people's. So I'm going to submit. And then it's going to take me to the application form. So if you've applied to for grants with us before, you'll recognise this. It looks pretty much exactly the same. So you'll see there's kind of tabs along here for the different sections of the application form. There's some instructions, the bits that you have to fill in. You'll see anything mandatory has a red asterisk on it. So you can go through different parts of the form just to fill in the information that you've got to do. You can also see there's some links on the top here. So if you need to contact us or if you need to access the guidance document, you can use those as well. But hopefully this looks fairly familiar if you've applied to us before. So what I'm going to do now is come back to the slideshow to continue the presentation, because we're going to talk through each of the questions now. And then just to say, any new questions for this year, we've highlighted in red, and we'll talk through them as well. So I think it's over to you next, Tom.
Excellent, thanks, Lisa. So yeah, as Lisa said, we'll just go, these will be the questions which are on the report. Some will be marked by assessors, some will not, and we'll obviously go through for ones which are relevant and kind of what we're looking for from you for each of these questions. In section 1 of the application is details about your organisation. This section isn't scored, but a clear answer will help give assessors a good grasp of who you are as an organisation. Next slide, please. This is a new question this year, which allows you to expand on previous questions. We aim to prioritise, as I said earlier, we're aiming to prioritise organisations who are led by people with lived experience of the issues that their beneficiaries face. Where this isn't possible, we want organisations to show that you have an active commitment to involving the beneficiaries in design and delivery of the services. For questions 1.9 and 10, these are also not marked, but are again useful for assessors to get a good understanding of what your organisation, or if you're working in a partnership, what you do and how this relates to your proposal, which you put forward further later in the application. Back over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Tom. So section 2 is probably the most important part of the application, as it's the bulk of what you want the funding for. So just to bear in mind, we don't mark your application based on spelling and grammar, but we do need to be able to understand what you're saying. So try and be clear, use bullet points if that's easier, and perhaps ask someone who knows little about the project to read through it to see if they understand. It will always be proportionate in our assessment. So basically this means the more money you're asking for, the more detail we'll expect in your application. So for this section and for others, we've removed word counts and given word guidance instead, based on feedback we received from groups last year. So it's important to stick to the point when answering your questions and only include details which you feel are relevant to the project. But we wanted to remove those word counts, as we know that some groups found it quite difficult to articulate within the brief word counts that we were allowing. So that's why we've got rid of those. So in terms of the specific question, so the project summary is essentially the title of your project, so what it's called, where it will be delivered. So we've changed this question slightly for this year, and we've changed this to allow you to select which wards your project will be delivered in. So this gives us a better idea of the geographical spread of projects across the whole borough. So if your project takes place in multiple wards, you can tick multiple wards, but just remember this is a specific location of where your activities will physically be delivered. So it's not necessarily that people are coming from different wards, but it's our activities are taking place in these locations. So in terms of start and end dates, just remember projects have to start this financial year. So as mentioned, they can be backdated to the 1st of April, but as long as they start sometime this financial year, and they can't last any longer than 12 months from the start date. So say, for example, your project starts on 1st of July 2023, it must finish by 30th of June 2024. So I hope that makes sense. It's 12 months from the start of the project, and the project must start this financial year. So question 2.4 is really important. So here you're asked to choose which of the 2 grant priorities your project is working towards, and talk about this in a bit more detail. So you need to include here what your project will achieve, how it fits with the priority, how it will achieve this and how it will be delivered, and also think about who will benefit and why.
So next of these bullet points is to think about when you're writing your answer. If an assessor still doesn't understand what your project is after reading this section a few times, it probably won't be a successful application. So make sure you kind of clearly link your project with the chosen priorities that Lisa went through above. Next slide, please. So these are grant programme priorities. When you're filling in your application, you want to think about how your idea fits into one of these programme objectives and choose it accordingly. Here's some examples from previous years that we used. So a project to support adults experiencing food poverty to cook and make healthy choices fits in well to priority 1. And for priority 2, an intergenerational mentoring scheme links well with building positive relations between groups. Some projects may feel that they contribute to both. This is fine, but you can reference this in your answer, but remember that it's better to align strongly with and clearly with one objective than to try and cover both vaguely. This scoring criteria is how assessors will be looking at your answer to determine success. Assessors are given a rating for each section and then an overall rating to the application based on this. For example, if an assessor rates this section as good, they will note what was missing if it wasn't cleared up in another section, and discuss this in parallel to other comparisons with other applications at the panel stage. Back over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Tom. So question 2.5 is also a really key question. So here you're asked to choose which of the equality aims your project best aligns to. So just a reminder, those 6 aims are on the screen at the moment. And then you're asked to describe how your project will achieve or work towards this, what success looks like and how you'll measure that. And again, as Tom said with the previous question, some projects may feel that they contribute to more than one, and that's fine. You can reference that in your answer. But remember, it's better to align really strongly and clearly with one aim than to try and cover them all quite vaguely. So under each aim, there is further detail. And again, this is outlined in the guidance document, and we'll share these slides with you. So each of the aims has that further detail to articulate what we mean by that aim. So for example, being healthy, people are supported to become more active and to develop and maintain positive physical, mental, social health and well-being. So an example of this from a project from last year was a free hip hop dance activity taking place within community settings run by experienced leaders. So similarly, enjoying and achieving, so further detail from that would be that people are supported to have opportunities to explore their creativity, develop their passion and skills, and explore their social, cultural and community heritage as creators, audience members, visitors and curators. So an example of that from last year was a cultural events programme for 6 months to support young people's cultural awareness and activities. So those are the kinds of things, but once you've had a look at that in more detail, I think it will become apparent what your project really fits into out of those. So in terms of the scoring criteria, so for very good answers, the aim chosen is really clearly outlined with the project and what you want to deliver. It seems appropriate and achievable given the project activities. How you'll work towards the aim is appropriate and realistic, and you've clearly identified what success looks like and what tools you'll use to measure that.
Excellent, thanks Lisa. Question 2.6 is we'll ask about how your project will be run and managed. Make sure you provide any relevant background experience of your organisation and staff, and discuss all elements of your project planning and delivering, including the planning, delivery and the evaluation. It often helps to go through a project step by step so assessors can get a kind of comprehensive picture of what your project looks like as a whole. Very good answers for this will be clear on how the project will be managed, who will be involved, and what relevant skills and experience they will bring to the project. For 2.7, as we've mentioned previously, we are looking for organisations so that they have an active commitment to involving beneficiaries in the design and delivery of the services. In this question, we're looking for you to demonstrate how your beneficiaries shape and guide your project. Good answers will show how beneficiaries are involved in every stage of the project, including planning, delivery and evaluation. Good answers will also show how feedback is taken and used to shape ongoing or future projects. A top tip for this is to give examples of how beneficiaries have been involved in your previous projects, if you have it, as this will show good experience in your area. And yeah, as the scoring criteria said, the very good answer for this will show how and why the project's beneficiaries are involved at every stage and how their input shapes the project. Back over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tom. So question 2.8 is all about risk. So asking about any risks that you've anticipated may arise when delivering your project. So one thing just to be really clear about here is never be subtle or imply things about risk. Always be very, very explicit. So especially if your project is working with children or vulnerable people, we'll always expect you to be referencing safeguarding in your risk section. You might also want to think about things like COVID. Hopefully that's not going to be so relevant this year, but you might want to have risks around, infection control, or what if something were to happen like another lockdown, how would that affect your project? So just remember, all projects, large and small, do present risks. in this section, you're expected to complete some kind of risk assessment outlining what risks may occur and how these will be mitigated. So a good application will clearly identify any relevant risks, assess the probability of this happening and the impact if it did, and articulate how this will be mitigated. So obviously this is going to look different for every project, but it's assessed by assessors for comprehensiveness. So it's surprising the amount of applications we receive where they say, oh no, we don't have any risks, and actually every project has risks. Even if you don't think it does, it definitely does. So just think about this section really, really carefully when completing this. And I also, just another tip here, sometimes people don't write much in this answer and say we have a risk assessment, or refer to their risk assessment. We want to see you talk about those risks in this answer. So it's absolutely great, and you should have a separate risk assessment, but make sure you're giving an overview of that within this answer as well. So in terms of the scoring criteria, very good answer will clearly acknowledge the main risks and have a clear and appropriate response for each one. So back over to Tom.
So thanks, Lisa. Section 3 is all about your beneficiaries, the type of people that you would like to support through your project. Only one part of this section is scored, but make sure your answers align with what you've told us about your project so far. For example, if you've told us your project is specifically targeting people at age 85 plus, but then tick multiple age groups in the section, assessors may be confused. If you're targeting groups based on particular qualities, such as ethnicity, you must be explicit about this. I mean, we appreciate that there's no one-size-fits-all model when it comes to beneficiaries, as everyone you support is an individual, but please use the space provided to describe your beneficiary needs and why you're best placed to meet them. 3.1 and 3.2 are for the numbers of beneficiaries and volunteers, if to put how many people you are leading as volunteers and how many beneficiaries you are aiming to reach. Make sure you're consistent with this across your narrative throughout all of your answers. You will be asked to choose one primary beneficiary group. We appreciate this may be difficult, as you may feel that your beneficiaries align across a number of these groups. In these cases, please use the question below to expand on the beneficiaries your project is most aimed at. Back over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tom. So the next part of this question asks you why you're focusing on this group and how you're best placed to do so as an organisation. So make sure you cover here how your project will benefit this group, why it's needed, how your organisation are best placed to support the group. Bring in evidence of why you're supporting this group. So that doesn't just need to be, statistics found from elsewhere. We really want to know evidence from your own experience of working with them. So talk through your track record and previous experience and things like that, because that builds a really good picture, not only of why your project is needed, but why you as an organisation are best placed to deliver it. So very good answers will be really clear on which group or groups they're targeting. It will fit in well with their application and make sense with what they want to deliver. You'll be able to articulate why the project is needed, the benefit to the beneficiary group, and your organisation's own track record using evidence that I've just mentioned. So section 3.4 asks you to tell us if your project is supporting people with protected characteristics, including ethnicity, age, religion, etc. So this section isn't scored, but it gives assessors a good idea of any particular equalities groups that you're supporting, and this is taken into consideration at panel. So like Tom mentioned a few slides ago, if you're working with specific groups of people, be explicit here and tick those that you're working with, but just make sure that it's a consistent narrative with the rest of your application. So, you know, if you suddenly said you're working with 85+-year-olds, but you've not mentioned them at all in the rest of your application, and you've had a very strong focus on the children that you're supporting, we're suddenly going to be very confused. So just make sure that you're consistent.
Excellent. Section 4 is all about your budget. This section will be scored. There are calculators buttons to make sure that your breakdowns are correct, and making sure that your budget breakdown makes sense in conjunction with the rest of your application. So anything that you've mentioned in your application which requires a budget line for it, remember to put that in there, because we'll generally be looking for consistency across the whole of the application. If you start talking about items in your budget which you've not discussed elsewhere in the application, then assessors will be confused by this and won't be able to mark it well. Next slide, please. We've created the how much can I apply for section to help you work out just exactly that. As a reminder, organisations can't apply for a grant that is more than 50% of their annual income. The calculator will work this out for you. So you basically put in your annual income, you choose, say, £20,000, and it will and if you put in that, it will tell you the maximum you can apply for is 10,000. Obviously, if your project only costs 3,000 to deliver, you will then ask for 3,000. This is just merely telling you the maximum amount you can apply for. Similarly, if your income's over £40,000, then 20,000 is the maximum amount you can apply for, and there's less than 50% anyway, so you wouldn't need to worry about this. 4.1 is asking how much you're requesting from us for your project. 4.2 is on there, and you'll only be asked to complete this if you're asking to part fund your project. For example, if your project as a whole costs 20,000 and you're asking for 10,000 from us and 10,000 from another funder, you will put that in for. You'll put the whole cost in 4.2. Over to you, Nisa.
Thanks, Tom. So question 4.3 is the budget table. So this is another really important section, as it tells us about how you've costed your project and what you're spending on. So there are 8 rows provided within the application. You don't have to use all of them if you don't need to. And there's also space in a box below to add more details if you need to. So the budget table is set out in 3 columns. So the first column is for the expenditure heading. So for example, here, venue hire. The second column is how much you're requesting from Hackney. And the third column is if you're applying for funding from other sources, what you're applying for there. So in this example on the slide, we've got this organisation's applying for £1,000 for venue hire from Hackney and £200 from other sources. So if you're just applying for funds from Hackney, you don't need to worry about that third column. But if you are getting match funding from elsewhere, then it's really helpful to include that so that we can see what our funding will cover and what's being covered elsewhere. So at the bottom of the budget table, there are 2 sections with calculator icons. So as Tom said, those calculators can help you calculate the sums you've put in your table. Always use these to double check that everything you've put in your table is adding up correctly. We do see a lot of projects fall down because their numbers are inconsistent. So just make sure that you're checking everything that you're putting through there. In terms of the scoring, so a very good answer will provide thorough, detailed and realistic costs based on the project information provided. The budget items will clearly link to the narrative and it enhances the overall clarity of the project ask. So again, we don't want to see items in your budget that have not been mentioned elsewhere within your application. So, you know, if your application is for a project that's taking place within a specific venue in Hackney, and suddenly in your budget we can see that you are looking for a taxi to Margate for the day, we're going to be confused. We won't understand what that's for. So just make sure it's always really consistent.
4.4 is an optional question. There's a question in the chat asking if we have to name other sources in the third column. So this is where you would name any other sources of funding. It gives you the opportunity to tell us where the other funding is coming from if you've indicated in third column. So if you've indicated that we're part funding your project but don't put anything in this answer, assessors may question the viability of your project. Section 5 is for you to input your organisation's bank details. This is to speed up the process of payment if you're awarded funding, so make sure you complete this accurately, as mistakes could cause issues with paying your grant if you are successful. This section for uploading attachments, this isn't scored. However, it's important to upload your documentation so that we can perform due diligence on your application. This is checked by the grants team to make sure you're eligible to apply. The exact documents you will need vary slightly between grant schemes, but generally you must attach an official governing document, your quality and diversity policy, your health and safety policy, your most recent set of audited, externally verified annual accounts, a redacted bank statement, which helps us check that your bank details are correct, certificate of insurance, and where applicable, safeguarding children or vulnerable adults policy. When you're completing this, make sure you click the upload button after each document in order to attach them properly. You may be contacted by a member of the team after submitting an application if there's any missing documents or if we need to clarify anything with you. Please look out for any emails from us for this, as it will help the process be speeded up. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tom. So the last part of the application form is the declaration. So you must tick to confirm that you're authorised to submit the application and that the information you provided is correct, that you understand the conditions of the grant should you be successful. So you have to include in here the name of the person making the declaration and the position within the organisation. And there's also an optional question, 7.2, if you'd like to sign up to our mailing list. This is optional, and if you're already signed up to the mailing list, there's no need to tick this. But if you're not signed up to the mailing list and would like to be, tick this and we will get you added to that. So what happens next? So as we mentioned, we will always receive more applications than we're able to fund. So please do be aware of this when you're making your application. So just to reiterate some of the things we've already mentioned, once you've submitted your application, you'll undergo eligibility and due diligence checks by the grants team. Your application will be assessed by volunteer assessors from the council and the VCS. All volunteers are trained and given guidance documents to support them make a fair assessment of your application using the scoring criteria that we've mentioned today. So we'll be recruiting volunteers over the coming weeks, so please do look out for further information about this if you'd be interested in taking part. New for this year, as mentioned, we have a clarifying question stage, which will allow us to ask you any questions about anything unclear in your applications before discussing them at panel. So please do make sure you respond to any of these requests by the deadline. Also, as mentioned, during the panel, assessors will discuss applications in comparison with each other, but will also take into consideration issues such as equalities, strategic objectives, and spread around the borough as well. And again, just to reiterate, we will always offer feedback to unsuccessful applicants, and we really do encourage you to think about this for future applications. And it's not just helpful if you're applying for our grants, but it's helpful generally as well. So back over to Tom now.
Thanks, Lisa. This is a list of key documents and resources available to support you with your applications further. Our website will always contain the up-to-date information and links that you need, including links to the application forms. Our VCS prospectus will give you an overview of the whole grants programme, as well as information about your general eligibility. There are guidance documents for each of the grants programme, which includes more information and guidance on specific application questions. It's always useful to have this open when you're going through your application, so you can get the full information about what's needed from that question. We've also compiled a document with information on general support available for VCS organisations. We'll have some resources on our website which you could use to help you with checking your policy documents and due diligence purposes. We also created some video resources to guide you through specific processes, for example, how to log into the application portal. As well as this, there's additional support available via our team and also through partner organisations. So feel free to contact us at any time using the email or the phone number if you have any questions about the programme. You can also sign up to our newsletter on that link, and we'll be sending out these slides after this event. As well as this, Hackney CVS are able to provide more bespoke application support through their organisational development team. And the East London Business Alliance are also able to offer an application review service where trained business volunteers can look through your applications and provide comment and feedback. Hackney CVS and Elba's application support are completely free for VCS organisations to access. So after this session, we'll be in touch with a short feedback form along with a copy of the slides. The recording of this session will be made available online via our website at a later date. And I'll stop recording and give you some time to give us some questions. Let me just stop the recording first, and yeah.